Miguel Santos was born in a narrow lane of Cebu City, where the houses leaned close to each other as if sharing secrets of survival. The air always smelled of sawdust, salt from the nearby sea, and the sweat of men who worked with their hands. His father, Ramon Santos, was a carpenter known in the neighborhood for fixing broken doors, patching old roofs, and building simple wooden tables that rarely brought much money but always earned respect. Ramon woke up before sunrise every day, his hands already rough and cracked long before Miguel learned how to write his name. For Miguel, those hands were symbols of sacrifice, pain, and love. Their home was small, just one room with a thin curtain separating the sleeping area from the kitchen, but it was filled with warmth. At night, when electricity was unreliable and candles flickered against the walls, Ramon would hum old Filipino songs while cleaning his tools. Miguel listened carefully, memorizing melodies before he even understood their meaning. Music entered his life quietly, like a friend who stayed when everything else felt uncertain. When Ramon worked late, Miguel would sit nearby, tapping rhythms on pieces of scrap wood, singing softly so as not to disturb his father's concentration. School was not easy. Miguel often arrived with worn shoes and a uniform patched more times than he could count. Some classmates laughed, others ignored him, but Miguel learned early how to turn pain into sound. During breaks, he sang under the mango tree at the edge of the schoolyard. Teachers noticed that when Miguel sang, his shy posture changed, his shoulders straightened, and his eyes lifted as if he could see a future beyond Cebu's crowded streets. Still, dreams were fragile things in a house where every peso mattered. When Miguel was younger, Ramon once told him, "Anak, I may not give you riches, but I will give you strength." Those words stayed with Miguel, especially on days when he helped his father carry heavy planks across the city or watched him negotiate low payments from customers who knew Ramon was too kind to refuse. Music became Miguel's promise, to himself and to his father, that their struggles would someday mean something more. Years ago, Miguel got his first chance to travel to America and stand on the stage of America's Got Talent. The opportunity felt unreal, like a story he had only heard on the radio. The entire neighborhood gathered to watch him leave, offering prayers and small coins for luck. But on that first appearance, fear swallowed his voice. The bright lights, the massive audience, and the pressure of representing his family overwhelmed him. He returned to Cebu quietly, ashamed and heartbroken, convinced he had failed not just himself, but his father. Ramon never blamed him. Instead, he welcomed Miguel home with the same gentle smile and said, "At least you were brave enough to try." Life returned to its routine, carpentry by day, singing by night, but Miguel was no longer the same. He practiced harder, sang deeper, and listened more carefully to the stories around him, the tired fishermen, the mothers selling food by the roadside, the children dreaming of escape. Every story found its way into his voice. As the years passed, Miguel grew stronger, not just as a singer, but as a person shaped by patience and discipline. He worked small jobs to help his family, sang at local events, and recorded songs on an old phone. Each note carried Cebu City with it, the struggle, the hope, the unspoken prayers. When the call came inviting him back to America's Got Talent, Miguel didn't celebrate loudly. He sat beside his father, held his worn hands, and promised, "This time, I will sing our truth." That promise became his purpose. Leaving Cebu again was painful, but different. Miguel was no longer a frightened boy chasing a dream. He was the son of a carpenter, carrying years of sacrifice in his voice, ready to return, not to escape where he came from, but to honor it on the world's biggest stage. The moment Miguel Santos stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage for his return audition, the weight of two worlds rested on his shoulders. Behind him were the narrow streets of Cebu City, the scent of sawdust, and his father's tired hands. In front of him were blinding lights, thousands of strangers, and judges who had seen every kind of talent imaginable. The applause that greeted him felt distant, almost unreal, as if it were happening to someone else. Miguel took a deep breath, reminding himself why he was there, not for fame, not for victory, but for truth. When Simon Cowell asked his name and where he was from, Miguel's voice was calm but soft. He spoke about his father, Ramon, a carpenter who had never once missed a day of work even when his body begged him to rest. Miguel explained that his father was watching from Cebu on a small phone, sitting in the same chair where he sharpened his tools every night. As he spoke, the massive screen behind the judges showed a brief glimpse of Cebu's crowded neighborhoods, instantly grounding his story in reality. The audience leaned in, sensing that this was more than just another audition. Miguel explained that he had been on the AGT stage before, but fear had defeated him. This time, he said, he returned not to prove he could sing, but to prove that dreams do not die just because they stumble. His hands trembled slightly as he held the microphone. For a brief second, silence filled the theater, so quiet that he could hear his own breathing. Then the first note escaped his lips. At the start, his voice was gentle, almost fragile, like someone speaking a secret. The song began with memories of childhood, watching his father bend over broken furniture, hearing the creak of old floors, feeling hunger but also love. As Miguel sang, his confidence grew. Each verse carried more strength, more emotion, as if years of struggle were finally finding release. The melody rose, and his voice followed, filling the room with a raw, aching sincerity that could not be taught. The audience was no longer just listening, they were feeling. Some wiped tears from their eyes, others held their breath. The cameras cut to the judges. Heidi Klum's expression softened, Sofia Vergara pressed her hand to her chest, and Simon Cowell, known for his tough critiques, sat unusually still, his eyes locked on Miguel. The lyric spoke of a son promising to lift his family out of hardship, of hands that bled so another voice could someday be heard. It was not a perfect performance in a technical sense, but it was painfully honest. Halfway through the song, Miguel closed his eyes. In that moment, the stage disappeared. He was back in Cebu, sitting beside his father in the dim light, singing quietly while Ramon worked. The final chorus soared, his voice breaking slightly, not from weakness, but from emotion. When the last note faded, Miguel lowered the microphone, his chest rising and falling as he fought back tears. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the entire theater exploded into applause. People stood, cheering, clapping, shouting his name. Miguel looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He glanced upward, imagining his father watching from across the ocean, and pressed his hand to his heart. On that stage, in that moment, Miguel didn't feel poor, small, or forgotten. He felt seen. The song had done what words never could. It had carried the story of a Filipino carpenter and his son from Cebu City to the heart of America, and it had left everyone listening forever changed. Simon Cowell did not speak immediately. For someone known around the world for sharp words and quick judgments, his silence was louder than any critique. He leaned back in his chair, then forward again, as if trying to find the right place to breathe. His eyes, usually guarded and analytical, were glossy now. The audience noticed it before he did. A murmur spread through the theater. Simon Cowell was emotional. Miguel stood frozen at center stage, gripping the microphone with both hands. His heart was still racing from the final note, his chest tight with everything he had just released. When Simon finally looked up at him, it wasn't as a judge looking for flaws, but as a man who had just been reminded why music matters. Simon exhaled slowly and shook his head, a small, almost disbelieving smile appearing on his face. "You know," Simon began, his voice quieter than usual, "I've heard thousands of singers on this stage." He paused again, choosing his words carefully. "Most people come out here trying to impress us. Big notes. Big performances. What you did was something very different. He tapped the desk lightly with his fingers. You told the truth. The crowd applauded softly, but Simon raised his hand, asking for a moment more. He looked directly at Miguel. When you started singing, I wasn't thinking about technique or whether you hit every note perfectly. I was thinking about your father. I was thinking about those hands you described. I was thinking about sacrifice. His voice cracked slightly, surprising even himself. Simon blinked, then nodded. That doesn't happen very often. Miguel's eyes filled with tears. Simon leaned forward. You came back here after failing once. Most people don't do that. They let fear win. But you didn't. You came back stronger, not because you wanted fame, but because you had something important to say. He gestured toward the audience. And every single person in this room felt it. Simon admitted that in his career, he had learned one powerful truth: audiences don't remember perfection, they remember emotion. Years from now, he said, people won't talk about how technically flawless that song was. They'll talk about how it made them feel. And today, you made people feel hope. The audience erupted again, louder this time, some openly crying, others cheering through tears. He looked down for a moment, then back at Miguel. Your father should be incredibly proud of you, Simon said firmly. Not because you stood on this stage, but because you honored him. You honored where you came from. Simon placed his hand over his heart. That is the kind of performance that stays with you long after the lights go out. The other judges followed with praise, but it was clear that Simon's reaction carried special weight. When it came time to vote, there was no hesitation. Simon gave a strong yes, standing up along with the audience. The standing ovation seemed endless, waves of applause crashing over Miguel until he could no longer hold back his tears. He bowed his head, overwhelmed, whispering a quiet thank you meant for someone thousands of miles away in Cebu City. As Miguel walked off the stage, Simon watched him go, still visibly moved. Later, speaking to the cameras, Simon explained that stories like Miguel's are the reason the show exists. Talent shows aren't just about discovering great voices, he said. They're about discovering great human beings. Tonight, we saw both. For Miguel, that moment was bigger than advancement in a competition. It was proof that his father's sacrifices had traveled across oceans and been heard. And for Simon Cowell, it was a reminder that even after all these years, one honest song, from the son of a poor Filipino carpenter, could still break through every wall and touch the heart.